Welcome back. Tonight's notes are on the quadratic formula. And this is on page 40. And we're going to put this in our table of contents as well. Okay. So far this unit we've learned how to factor. Well, that was last unit, but we learned how to solve quadratics using factoring. We figured out how to do completing the square. And now we're going to do quadratic formula. And quadratic formula is cool because it can solve any quadratic, even ones that can't factor. So any quadratic equation can be solved using the quadratic formula. Any. So even if something doesn't factor, we can still use the quadratic formula to solve. So the standard form of a quadratic is 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And just like with the zero product property, we do need it to equal 0. Okay, the important parts of this are going to be the a, the b, and the c. The a always goes with the x squared, the b goes with the x, and the c is the constant. Okay, so what is the quadratic formula? The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, whatever's b goes in where you see a b. Whatever a is in for a, and the c goes in for c. And if you plug in those values into this, you will always be able to solve a quadratic. So let's do an example. Okay. So we have y equals negative 3x squared minus 5x plus 9. Well, first off, we need it to equal 0. So this is going to be 0 equals negative 3x squared minus 5x plus 9. Now, let's go ahead and identify what a, b, and c are. So looking at this, what is a? A is negative 3 because it's with the x squared. So I'm going to write negative. What is b? B is negative 5. It is very important that you connect the sign with the number. And then the 9 is the c. You'll notice that again I circled the sign so I knew if it was negative or positive. Now from there we plug in to our equation. So we have x equals negative b. So I'm going to write a negative, and then my b is negative 5. And I'm going to put that in parentheses so I don't drop my negative. So negative b plus or minus the square root b squared. B is negative 5. Negative 5 squared minus 4, a is negative 3, c is 9. All over 2 times a, which is negative 3. Okay, now that looks like a lot, but that's okay. So let's go through this step by step. X equals, we have a negative, negative 5. So what happens to that? Well, it becomes a positive. So here, that's going to be a positive 5. We have plus or minus the square root. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug whatever's inside directly in my calculator. And I'm going to leave the square root out, so I'm just going to write what's inside. I have negative 5 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times 9 equals 133. And I'm going to put that underneath my square root bar all over. Then I have 2 times negative 3, negative 6. And surprisingly, that's it. The reason that's it is because there's nothing I can do with the square root of 133. Let's say that was the square root of 144. Square root of 144 is 12. So that can work out there. That would mean you would take the square root. So I'm going to have you do an example using the quadratic formula. Okay, so your example is going to be two x squared plus 5x minus 3. So go ahead and use the quadratic formula and see if you can solve this. The first thing I'm going to do is identify my a, b, and c. A is 2, b is 5, c is negative 3. I apologize, I didn't make it equal 0. That's okay, I can just write it right underneath here. Okay, and now I'm going to plug it into my quadratic formula. So x equals negative b, which is 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So we're going to have x equals, well, here we have a negative 5 plus or minus the square root, and again, I'm going to plug that directly in my calculator. So I have 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 3, 49, all over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay? Well, this time I have the square root of 49. Can I take the square root of 49? Yeah, right? What's the square root of 49? The square root of 49 is 7. So it's going to be negative 5 plus or minus 7 over 4. Okay? Now looking at this plus or minus, just like when we did completing the square, we have two separate problems now. Okay? So I'm going to separate my two problems into x equals negative 5 plus 7 over 4 and x equals negative 5 minus 7 over 4. And again, I'm just going to use my calculator here. We have negative 5 plus 7. Excuse me, I'm going to put that in parentheses because it's over 4. Well, we get 0.5. So that's one of my x values. And then we have negative 5 minus 7 over 4, and we get negative 3. Okay? Now, here's the important question. What did you just find? When I found these two values, what is that? Those two values are x-intercepts. That's always what you're finding when you're solving quadratic equations. So I'm going to put an asterisk here. just like you were doing when you were solving using zero product property, just like you were doing when we did completing the square. Here, we're finding x-intercepts again. All right, thanks for watching.